Hi class, for this video we're going to set up some GPOs. So the first thing I need to do is some prerequisite work. So I'm going to sign into DFS1 as a domain admin. I'm going to open up DFS. In the data folder, no, actually I'm just going to create a new folder. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it wallpapers. I'm going to put one share on DFS1. Give everyone full control. Then the other target will be on DFS2. Again, I'm just turning off the share permissions. Then I want to go to the parent DC. An Active Directory uses the computers. I'm going to create a new group. All users, all domains. And it's going to be a domain local group. The members will be domain users from Contoso. I'm going to go to a datum. Domain users from a datum. Then go to the child domain. Domain users from the child domain. So this all users, all domain group covers everyone in the entire forest. So now that I have that group done, I'm going to go over here to, I didn't finish the wizard for my DFS. Doesn't really matter, they're both blank. So I created this wallpapers folder. It has 2 targets. I turned off the share permissions. So I'm going to go over here to file and storage, share, and for wallpapers, I'm just going to do it to 2. That was my primary. I go to properties, customize the permissions, remove those 2, and add my domain local group. All users, all domains. I forget what I called the group. all users, all domain. All, because I forgot the I in the name. I'm going to fix that though. I'm going to give them modifier rights. So I'm going to go back to my DC and fix that name. Once you fix it there, you got to rename it here. Okay. So basically I created a share. I allowed all users, all domain. I should make this domains. Modify rights to that share. So all users, all domains have modified rights to that share called wallpaper. The next thing I'm going to do is go to this faculty OU reset Tim Jones's password because we didn't set it before. Users must change it at next login. I'm unchecking that. Okay. So now I'm going to go to DFS1 and sign as Tim Jones. And earlier I downloaded 4 pictures. Guys, I don't care what pictures you've downloaded. It really doesn't matter. It's in pictures. I'm going to copy them, go to my S drive, actually I'm just going to go to contoso.com public. I'm not sure why the S drive isn't working. I'm going to go to wallpaper and paste those in. I got to look at my group policy, but I really don't need it for this purpose. So guys, I don't care what wallpapers you download. I just have 4 pictures just so we can demonstrate some group policies. So I created a DFS share and added some pictures to it. So now I'm going to parent DC1. We're going to open up group policy management and we're going to create 3 group policies or 4 group policies. For group policy 1, I'm going to modify it. I'm going to go to user, Windows settings, no, administrative templates, desktop, and then I'm going to go to desktop wallpaper. I'm going to enable this policy, contoso.com. Actually, you can do this just to make your life easier, so you know you don't have any typos. Open up a file explorer, which is very, it's kind of weird that, oh, because that's pointing to an actual subfolder, not the DFS share. Public, wallpapers. I'm going to copy that, paste it in here, and then just type wallpaper1.jpg. I downloaded all JPEGs. You make sure you download something that you know. It could be a PNG, and click OK. So for GPO1, it goes to the first wallpaper. For GPO2, again, policies, administrative tools, desktop. I'm under user policies, and configure, paste it in there, and do wallpaper 2.jpg. For 3, I'm going to edit it. Policies, administrative templates, desktop, desktop, desktop wallpaper. Enable. Then the last GPO. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is order of uh, precedence. The first policy that's actually applied on every computer is a local policy. This you can't configure globally. You'd have to manually go around to each computer and configure it. So a lot of people don't use that, but I still want to show you how to get to it. I'm going to do gpedit.msc, and this will get me to my local GPO. Each computer has a local GPO, whether it's a server or a client product. And then I have site policies. Those are applied next. So I see my sites here. If you don't see your sites, you have to right click, show sites, and check both sites. So if I apply a policy called GPO1, that will be applied next. The local policy first, the site policy second, then the domain policy, would be third. Guys, I'm saying it's second here because I'm really not considering the local group policy, again, because not a lot of people use it. So local group policy, then the first domain group policy would be GPO1, at the domain level would be next. Then at an OU level, let's just say at Central Campus, GPO3 would be applied. Then in our English department, where Tim Jones is, I would apply 4. I could have applied it at faculty members if I wanted to. So This will be applied first, this will be applied second, this will be applied third, and the GPO4 will be applied last. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to DFS1, sign back in as Tim Jones. I'm going to sign out. When a user account is logged in, it downloads all the latest GPOs. So that's why I logged out, so it automatically downloads the latest GPOs. So I'm going to go to contoso.com, public, wallpapers, and what is wallpaper 4? That is wallpaper 4. So the next thing I'm going to do is open up a PowerShell. I already have the font set to 20 so you guys can see it. I'm going to do GP result /Z, then scope is user. So I just want to see what policies are applied for me. Okay, so here's the policies that were applied. GPO1 was first, GPO2 was second, DFS share was third, GPO3 was fourth, because I'm not going to worry about GPO share. Don't worry about that. So this one was applied first at the site level. This is applied second at the domain level. This was applied third at the parent OU level, and this was a sub OU level. So when a policy gets applied, they don't apply each policy independently. What the client does is the client takes all those policies, puts them in one big policy, and then applies that. So I had the wallpaper setting set here at this level. Then I set it again here, so it overwrote those settings. Then I set it again here and it overwrote those settings. And then I set it again here and it overwrote those settings. So if I set something to here and I set something different here, here, and here, this would still be effective. So just because you set one thing at one level, if you write something else at another level, it doesn't overwrite this. It'll only overwrite this if the same exact thing is set at each level. Because what it does is it merges all the policies into one policy and then applies that one policy. That's the client-side processing. So just to reiterate, the local policies applied first, always. Then site policies are applied. The domain policies are applied. So that policy, GPO2 was applied, then DFS was applied because they're both domain policies. Then our OU policy was applied. This is for Central Campus, and then this one is for the English department. So the closer you are to the object, most likely that's the last policy that's going to be applied. So in this case, Tim Jones was in this OU. So this is applied last, next to the last, before that, and before that. So that's how policies are applied over time. Now, I'm going to highlight this policy. Actually, I'm going to do it down here. Go to details. I'm trying to see something here. 1 second, if I can find it. Okay, they probably took it out on Windows 19, uh, which is probably a good thing. Windows Server 2019. No, it's here. So I'm going to go to this policy right here. I'm going to enforce GPO2. I'm going to go back to DFS. Log out and log back in. I could do a GP update, but I just want to be sure this works. So now which policy is being applied? The second wallpaper. So basically what I'm doing here is, even though this policy right here made the same change that this policy did, a different wallpaper, and this one again changed it a fourth time, by enforcing a policy, if someone sets something different for the same setting, it's going to force that setting down all the way through. So if I enforce this, it would have no bearing because this one's going to be enforced first. So I'm going to unenforce that policy. So if someone gets slick and tries to, if you're the domain admin and you make a change to a policy, then someone down at this level thinks, well, I don't like that, so I'm going to change it at my level. Well, the domain admin or the OU admin can enforce his policy, so at that point, it will always take effect. So I'm going to enforce this again to show you something else. If I can find it. I'm going to pause the video while I try to find this. Okay, I found it. So I'm going to enforce it at this level. Then at the English department, I'm going to block inheritance. So if I go to group policy inheritance, even though I blocked at this level, I'm enforcing at the domain level. So you can block a policy from inheriting any other policies. So basically, if I did one setting here and made another setting here for a different setting that's unrelated to this one, and I blocked inheritance, this would apply. But you can't override a force with a blocking inheritance. So if I unforce this and I block at this level, that means none of these other policies apply. I'm only applying my policy. So you have the ability to force a GPO, and at that point, no one can override those settings. If you set them at this level and someone sets the same thing, yours will be effective, the other ones won't. Or I could block inheritance. If I click on OU, I can say block inheritance. And so at that point, the site policies aren't applying, The domain policies aren't applying. Other OU policies aren't applying. Only that policy right there. So if I unblock it, I can see, excuse me, if I unblock inheritance, I can see all four policies are applying. So the next thing we're going to go over is permissions. So I'm going to pause the video right now because I have a meeting I have to go to, and then I will come back and do permissions. Okay, my meeting's done with. So one thing I wanted to talk about that I remembered before I move on to permissions is when I look at a group policy and I go to edit, I have two sections. I have a computer section and a user section. Sometimes there's the same settings for computers and for users. So you do need to be aware of that. Um, let's talk about when user when user settings are applied, when the user logs in. And so computer settings apply when the computer boots up. So which one's applied first? Because we were talking about order of precedence. Site policies are applied first, domain policies are applied second, OU policies are applied third, then sub-OU policies are applied fourth. And there might be more and more sub-OUs. But we also have to keep in mind that that whole structure goes again when the user signs in. So it goes through all those policies for the computer, and then when the user logs in, it goes through all those policies again for the user section. And if the user section overwrites something that a computer section has done in any of the GPOs, you might have a problem. So let's say there's a scenario where you have a kiosk machine. And in that kiosk machine, you have it really locked down. A kiosk machine could be like a machine in your lobby or a machine in the library or a machine at a front desk or something like that, where they can sign in as a standard user account or they can sign in as their own user account, but it's really limited to a very specific purpose. And at a point like that, you might not want to allow the user policies to overwrite the computer policies that lock things down. So you have this inside of a computer GPO, you have under computer configuration policies system group policy object, and let me find it. Let me expand this. I'm looking for a particular setting. I could turn off at this point local group policy processing if you don't intend on using any local policies and you don't want your users to get slick and configure that. Um, right here. Here's what I'm looking for. Configure user group loopback processing. So basically, what happens is when your computer boots up, it goes through this process of all those GPOs through the chain, site, domain, OU, sub OU. And then when your user logs in, it does the same thing. So if your user sets any policy that the computer had already set, you're going to overwrite it. So what you could do is you could turn on this um, loopback processing, meaning as soon as the user logs in and it runs through all the user policy, you're going to loop back and rerun all the computer policies so it can do one of two things. If I enable this, I could replace uh, any policy that the user overwrote with the computer, or I can merge the two policies together, with the computer one applying after the user settings. So the computer would overwrite the user. But if the user had anything set, they would actually count as long as it didn't conflict with the computer portion of the policy. Replace, you would just get rid of the user policies altogether. Um, you know, so it all depends on what your organization is trying to achieve. But keep in mind that we have that precedent order applies to the computer, then it applies to the user. And if you want to rerun the computer after the user logged in, you would turn this policy on. Not a lot of people know about this, and it's kind of funny because every book I ever picked up always has a lesson on this. And again, our book does, I believe our book has one too. But it's been around since 2000 days, Windows XP, Windows 2000, 2003. They say this policy only applies to those machines, but it doesn't apply all the way up to 2019. So be aware of this if your organization has any sort of kiosk machine where you want the computer policies to apply, not the user. This is probably the policy that you want to play with. Like I said, uh, it's kind of buried down in there. You have to search for it. I'm not a network admin anymore, so I don't use this stuff that often. But go through and look at that as well. So the last thing we're going to do is talk about permission. Guys, I'm not going to go through and show you how to set all the settings for a policy because last time I checked, there's over 4,000 settings. It all depends on what you can do. You can install software, you can control the desktop, you can control the control panel, you can control people's start menu, you control what network drives they have, uh, all kind of things. You can run random PowerShell scripts. Um, we've done a lot with GPO so far, but I have two ways to apply a policy: through security filters or Wmi filters. When we were in 1390 setting up a direct access server, it automatically set up a Wmi filter. And basically, a Wmi filter is a SQL statement that queries the Active Directory database and applies a policy based on something like that. So you could query your Active Directory database to find all Windows 7 machines and apply the policy to that. You could query your Active Directory database to query all machines that have a certain network card. Those are WMI filters. And the most common one is the security filtering. So we have the security filter, which is basically um, apply a policy. So if I put a group policy and I link it to an OU, and there's user objects or computer objects in that OU, everyone in that OU will read the policy by default. So you'll have read writes to the policy because you need to be able to read it to know whether it applies to you or not. If you add something to the security filter, what you're telling them is not just read it, but also apply that policy. Back in the day, we didn't have this little security filter here. You would go into delegation. You would actually right click here and go to security. There was a properties, then you could go to the security permission. But now if you want to get to that, you go to delegation, advanced, and here's our regular security permissions. So you could do all that here, and if you notice, if I highlight authenticated users and click here, they have read and apply. So if you signed in successfully, whether you're a computer account or a user account, you have read this policy. But adding them to that security filter will also give you the apply permission. You could come in here, give another user rights to make changes to this GPO. Um, I'm not going to go into that too much, but if you want a particular user to apply a GPO, let's say I put it at the domain level. I'm going to get rid of GPO4 and delete it. I'm going to link it to the domain level. And then I'm going to highlight the policy and remove. Guys, if you have a little pop-up that comes up, check the box so it doesn't keep coming up. It's just warning you that you're dealing with the link and not the actual GPO. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to remove authenticated users, and I'm going to add Tim Jones. If I go to delegation, I can see Tim Jones is there. If I click on advanced, he has read and apply. So I put it at the domain level, but Tim Jones is down here. So basically, by putting it at the domain level, I'm forcing every object in this domain, whether it's a computer object or user object, to read that policy, even though they're not supposed to apply it, because they have to read it to know whether they're applying it or not. The way OUs and GPOs are supposed to be designed is you don't want to apply everything at the domain level, because it's going to take users and computers too much time to log in if they're processing all these GPOs that don't really affect them. So you shouldn't really, and you could do this. You could put all the GPOs here and then specify which users should apply them. Or I could delete this, link it back to the OU that it belongs on, and then just make sure authenticated users can apply. So anyone in this GPO or this GPO or this GPO would get that policy. And then it makes it a lot simpler. Those people are the only ones that are reading it, and those people are also the only ones that are applying it. If I had a user in another, um, like the math department, there's no reason for them to read GPO4, even though they're not going to apply it, because they're not going to apply it. So I think it's better to have GPOs linked to the OUs, not mess around with the security permissions. I've seen a lot of domain admins link everything to the domain and make sure only that group can read it, they can apply it. But everyone else is still reading that policy. So you need to be very careful with that. Um, the last thing I want to talk about is I'm going to create two groups. Task group one, this is only going to be for this domain, so I'm just going to leave it global. And task group two. I'm pointing this out because I see a lot of users make this mistake. going to go to Tim Jones and add him to those two groups. Okay, so Tim is a member of those two groups, plus he's also a member of the domain admins group. This was for another lab. So test group 1 and test group 2. So what if I moved this to the math department and test group 2 to the English department? Sorry, to the English department. So test, maybe I grabbed the wrong group. Oh, okay, so I have test group 1 in the math department. I have test group 2 in the English department, and Tim Jones is a member of both. If I applied a policy to the English department and I applied a policy to the math department that conflicts with the policy here, which one would apply for Tim? It has no bearing. If Tim's a member of this group and you put this group in an OU, then apply the policy to the OU, it won't make any difference because policies don't get applied to groups like this. I can do security filters to a policy, but I'm not saying any authenticated user in this OU would get that, or in this OU would get that policy. This thing is so laggy right now. So any authenticated user in this OU would get this policy. That's different than putting a group in an OU and applying a policy to the OU and thinking that group will get it. This is not how it works because a user can be in multiple groups and you wouldn't know really which policies that they're going to get. Are they going to get the policies from here or from here? So group membership doesn't follow, I mean, policies don't follow group membership. There's no reason, in my opinion, to move groups out of the user container. Because if you put it in this container, like this one or this one, some junior admin might think, wait a second, that user's a part of that group's in that OU, the policies applied to that OU, why isn't the user getting it? And thinking, and I've seen people diagnose it for literally days. I've come across people like, I just can't get this GPO to work. Well, because it doesn't follow groups. So avoid putting groups in OUs because it gives people the impression that a policy is being applied to that OU. The only reason that I'd want to put a group in an OU is if I was going to delegate control over that OU to another individual. At that point, it makes sense to put a group in an OU. But other than that, there's really no reason to put a group in an OU. GPOs don't follow group memberships. When you link a GPO to an OU, all the users or the computer accounts will read that GPO. They might not apply it, They'll apply it depending on whether they get the security filters. But the fact that they're in that OU and that GPO is linked to that OU, they will definitely read the OU. I mean, they will read the policy, but groups have no bearing. These policies are only linked to users and computers. I just want to point that out because I've seen that mistake so many times. I want to see if I am missing anything. Now, the book does a pretty good job about going over these policies, but they also talk about how to back up restore policies. Uh, I don't think that's that difficult to do. Back it up, restore it. Okay, guys, that's it for this video, and I will see you in the next video.